Hey, I'm Sven Masterson, and I'm joined today by Dennis Collins. Dennis and I are both co-founders in the Mentoring Men community, along with Matt Epsky and Charles McKeever, who are not on this call with us. And in this video, we want to talk to you about the kind of marriage advice that you seek. Now, we're a community dedicated to the entire journey of a man through life, but many men come and find out about us when they suffer some sort of marriage or relationship struggles. And we've been there ourselves. We actually got into men's work after discovering some challenges within our own relationships. And the landscape of trying to figure out who can help you through those times can be really challenging. And so we want to answer the question on this meeting or video: can a divorced man help you to recover and repair your failing marriage? And we're going to just trust that we'll get a little tangential at times and cover some interesting topics related to this. But Dennis, what made me think about this call is a number of men I talk to, as I'm sure you do, who reach out and they've looked at different programs, they've looked at different YouTubers, they've gone to this website or that website, they've been pitched some sort of course, or repair your marriage in 7 days, 21 days, etc.
Techniques.
And they're really uncertain about can a man really help them to repair their marriage. And a lot of times when you look a little deeper at some of these people that are sharing these things on the internet, it can be kind of hard to find out what their story is, or sometimes even worse, in that when you look at what the story is, you find out the person's been might not even be married, they might be extremely young, they might be divorced multiple times. And so I thought it'd be good to actually talk about these contexts with men, tell a little bit of our backgrounds as men and relationship wise, and also how a man might think about choosing a mentor or coach or guide to help him through these circumstances, and exactly what role a coach or guide's marital status can or cannot play in that conversation. So any initial thoughts?
You talked about some of these coaches having 2 divorces. Does that eliminate them from helping men?
Well, it can. It all depends. That's what we want to talk about, right? Yeah.
Do you learn from your experiences? So I am one of those coaches, and I want to put a little asterisk. I said I would never marry again, and we'll visit that again later. But like a lot of men, I thought I was semi-happily married until I got kicked to the curb. And like most men we meet, it's like a bomb went off and it caught him totally unaware. And I made every mistake. I got angry. I didn't respond from the heart. The way I responded guaranteed there was no saving that. I don't know if it was salvageable anyhow, but the way I reacted, because I didn't respond. And then I am also a coach who divorced a woman some years later. And I'm not going to make this long, but there was an illness involved. There was a significant change in personality through no fault of my ex-wife's. And this is what ultimately I was looking to go into coaching, but this is what actually put me on the path to where I'm sitting here right now with you. And you hear a lot of blame when there's a divorce, and it wasn't her fault in that case. And it was about a 2-year process from finding a coach until I finally said, I want a divorce. And it sounded like that when I said, you're not happy. And honestly, that first divorce, you've heard me say, it was the worst thing that was ever done to me, is now the greatest gift I've ever been given because of where I am. Because I've seen it from 2 perspectives, and I'm able to help men not make the mistakes I made, like a shallow, ignorant chucklehead back then. And with all the men we've helped and the men we run into, we've got You've got, how long have you been married? 26, 27,
29 years. Yeah.
29 years. Okay. Charlie's up over 20, saved his marriage. Matt and I were not so fortunate. And what is wonderful is we all bring different perspectives, and there isn't a right or a wrong. It's every man finds his coach. And probably there's one dirty secret we probably don't always talk about, but we're not in the business of saving marriages.
Yeah, this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because when you're married and your marriage is struggling, we can often bring this preconception that the best outcome is saving the marriage. And I confess I had that same thing. You know, I got married at 20 years old. I got married with a till death do us part. And when my own marriage started to really encounter some extreme difficulty, I really had a hard time navigating this space because I didn't know what would happen, but I also was really attached to one outcome, the marriage working. And now, interestingly, in my journey, what I didn't realize was you can do that to your peril, because if the marriage, quote unquote, works, meaning you don't divorce, but you're living an incongruent life where you're having to become an inauthentic person, or your spouse is having to be inauthentic, or perhaps you have to live outside of your integrity in order to stay married. That's not really a good outcome, but I didn't know that at the time. And so one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is to, first of all, open up to a man's awareness that when there's marriage conflict, there are lots of different ways it can go. And among the four founders, as you've mentioned, two of us have stayed married and turned our marriages into thriving, connected, and intimate relationships. And two of us have concluded those marriages for good and sound reasons. And all of that, as the four of us as founders would say, were success. Now, that might be an idea a man cannot get his head around if his marriage is failing, because he might be locked into this belief that the only success is staying married. And so I thought we were talking about this a little bit. Go ahead.
It's the wrong metric. It's why being outcome dependent. I know you and I have told guys we can't help you if their only focus is divorce is unacceptable, I have to save this marriage. And it's why I sometimes tell men, your pastor's not always the best counselor, because they're often outcome dependent. A lot of them are focused on just, you can't get divorced. And it doesn't allow you to put an end to the version 1.0 relationship that's not working and create a loving, connected, and deeply intimate version 2.0. Sometimes you even have to have an actual divorce to get there.
Right. But even being, you're bringing up an idea I think is really crucial here. And it was a big pivot for me. Having come from a religious background, taught things like that divorce was absolutely a no-go, no option. Here's where I got with it. And I think this is worth saying. And I always shock people when I say this on video. But because I was married until death do we part, I just straight up wanted my wife to die. And if you kind of think about it from, a religious perspective, one day it kind of occurred to me just how out of integrity it is to say, man, I'm holding on till death do I part, but then secretly wishing your spouse would perish. Like, that doesn't seem like it would honor whatever creator that you are in a relationship with or worshiping. But I was stuck there because I was taught this. And interestingly, when I started to question this whole concept, my marriage improved precisely because I stopped elevating my marriage above my own sense of self and well-being. I'd fallen into the trap that my purpose in life is to just, be everything for kids and a wife. Now, I've been accused a number of times of somehow turning in a selfish direction for daring to think that I mattered as a human being individually. And interestingly, when YouTube trolls or people in Facebook groups or whatnot have critiqued me this way, because my wife and my children have all thanked me for that transition, because I was trying to serve them from an empty tank, right? But I had to
You were
let
less than.
go. What was that?
You were less than when you were in that
I was less than, and then I couldn't
situation.
figure out why I didn't feel respected. I didn't feel appreciated. I didn't feel valued. I didn't feel understood. Like I didn't give any of those things to me. Why would anybody else do it, right? So a big part of my own transformation was loosening my grip on one particular outcome. And interestingly, I tell people all the time, I have the outcome I have of a deeply connected, thriving, intimate, and passionate marriage precisely because I was willing to lose it. I was willing to not have that and be a whole, healthy human being. And it's not that you can only have one or the other. It's that if you're fiercely gripping on staying married, that question needs to be reconsidered. Now, you and I grew up at a time where a lot of people did this. I don't know, I don't remember your parents' story, but I've witnessed a number of marriages in my life where the man and woman stayed married and they're like, hey, we stayed married. We've been at it 50, 60, 70 years. And they absolutely hate each other. And, you know, when I look at that, I think to myself, I don't think calling that a success is really a good idea. And a lot of times it's like, well, we did this for the kids. And I could tell you as a kid, I don't want to live in a story where I'm the reason that two people that hate each other have basically stuck it out. That makes me kind of weirdly responsible for the unhappiness of two individuals, right? So maybe we could talk about some of these things, some of the men you run into, these backgrounds, these stories. What's coming up?
What's interesting, a lot of adults now that we work with, a lot of men will say, hey, I wish my parents would have gotten divorced. Or when they do get divorced, sometimes, well, it's about time. They stay together for the kids actually harms the kids more because you model an unhealthy, unloving relationship and say this is a successful marriage.
Yeah.
What's conveniently overlooked too, and we had somebody who used to be in our community talked about, you know, my grandparents stayed married for 60 something years. Your grandmother didn't have a choice. She had no way to earn a living. And if he was rude, beat her, she couldn't really leave. And so it wasn't that long ago, women really couldn't say, I'm not good with this. And, you know, I said earlier, I was allergic to marriage. Now, I just reserved a place for the wedding and the reception this past week that's occurring next May. Why? Because through a variety of lessons, both some the hard way and with the work we do with our community, I have learned how to grow an amazing relationship. And I'm incredibly selfish. I go on retreats multiple times. I have poker night. I do things for myself. I'm at the gym 5 or 6 times a week. And am I selfish? You're darn right. So I can show up as the best man possible for me and for my loved ones. And when you were being selfless and giving all to the family and wife, you were resentful. You were probably at 60%.
Right.
Summed up and give you the benefit of the doubt. How can you truly serve and give from a loving, abundant heart when you're not even, your tank's not topped off, your cup is mostly empty?
Right.
And I literally, the call I was on before we got on this video, we talked about you have to fill your own cup so you can then give from an abundant and overflowing heart instead of looking to get.
Right. Yeah. And that was what the missing piece for me. And I would just clarify for men watching, there's nothing wrong with pouring yourself out for your wife and children. My wife and my children would say today, I do that. But what was never taught to me was the prerequisite work that has to be done in your life so that that is full, right? Like you said, if I'm trying to be selfless and pouring out myself, but I don't like myself. In fact, I used to loathe myself. I was tremendously needy, tremendously hurt, wounded, insecure. I lacked really lots of good things, but man, I sure put it all out there on the line every day. And, my family didn't prosper for it, much like if I said, let me give you all the food I have, and it's the burnt crumbs on the bottom of a pan. Well, that might feel really generous, but it doesn't sustain your family, right? And so it was this shift away from seeing that marriage is the point to seeing that marriage exists to bring about the opportunity for the husband and wife to discover their own wholeness. And when I stopped feeling like I was subservient to marriage as though it was some sort of deity, and I turned it around to understanding that marriage is for me. I'm not for marriage. It's for me. And I let it kind of accomplish that work. I let it show me, kind of like a big fat mirror, the stuff that needed to take place in my life. Then I stopped gripping to the outcome of dying married to the same woman, and instead being my best me. And that has made my marriage great, right? But it was a painful thing. And so I remember in my own journey reaching out to, our mutual mentor and coach. I remember having a little bit of a paradoxical feeling like, hey, my marriage isn't going so well. Now, a little bit of context. I wasn't actually necessarily trying to save my marriage when I reached out to this man. I didn't know his marital status. In fact, I thought I wanted to maybe get divorced, and I was looking for just a little bit of an attaboy, and maybe somebody to say, yeah, you're right, you're justified, go do it. Now, I reached out to a man who was divorced, and he told me, you need to have more empathy and compassion for your wife. And so I want to tell that story because we can get locked into this idea that a divorced man can't help me turn my marriage around. And I would say without equivocation, that is absolutely because of a divorced man that I stayed married, because that divorced man told me really what I needed to hear. And he did that by bringing the full understanding of his own story and experience, to the encounter with me. He saw what I really needed. And I'm glad I didn't get locked into this idea that only a married man can help me save my marriage, because it was not true for me. Now, I help a lot of men turn themselves around. Like you said, we're not really about marriage. This is a misconception by people that might watch us on YouTube. We're about the wholeness of men. It just so happens to be that if a man's going to turn around his marriage, it's going to be because he's whole and he's renewed within himself. And that's the work that we do. And does marital status play into that? Do you think your marital status has anything to do with whether or not you can help a man experience renewal, connection, inspiration, and empowerment, the four main things we help men with?
Since I've been divorced, since I've gone down the path of becoming a coach and a mentor, I'm going to have to say no. And I'm upfront with them about not caring about the marriage, but I can care about them and I can help them. And, we have to be open-minded. Like I said, I love the first time I heard you share how you wished you'd be a widower so you could then be free. I'm like, so nice to see someone who's being honest.
I was really scared to say that, by the way. I thought, man, I must be the biggest a-hole in the world to be thinking that. And one reason I'm quite willing to tell people that is because I find people are thinking this all the time, especially people who are married till death do us part. And I felt a tremendous amount of judgment and shame for feeling this way. And when I started to just tell people authentically that that's where I was, including, I remember saying it with my wife next to me on a YouTube video, a live video. And I thought to myself, I've never said this in her presence before. I hope this goes well because I'm in a live audience, right? And man, she didn't bat an eyelid. And it's because in reality, she felt like that too sometimes, because we both were stuck in this mindset that we served marriage instead of marriage serving us. And when we flipped that around, it turned our marriage around. But keep going.
Now your cup is full and you can pour into, you have amazing kids, a wonderful wife. and you're not drained trying to please everyone but yourself.
Right.
And it's funny because we see guys go through the worst, and even the ones that don't save their marriage, they end up being able to, because they have worked on themselves, they know how to create an amazing relationship now. And it's like a garden. You've got to tend to it. You can't just plant a seed and go, okay, I'll come back in 5 months to
Yeah.
harvest. You've got to weed, you've got to water, and I do a better job with my relationship than I do with my actual garden. Let me tell you,
It's
you got
interesting
to
you
get a little
mentioned
more attention.
garden. I use the garden metaphor a lot with men. And recently a guy was asking me about this because we use the idea of cultivation as a metaphor for relationship all the time. But what I've told a number of men is you're still only able to cultivate a beautiful garden if you're not a gardener with stage 4 cancer, right? Yes, you have a role to play. You can create the relationship or the garden you want, but you have to, as the gardener, which I would suggest is the male role, you have to be whole. You have to be healthy. You have to have the skills. You have to have the energy and the
The
ability to be out
knowledge.
in the garden, the knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you raised up the gardening thing too, because part of my perspective started to shift, as you know, when we bought our homestead where we live in Pennsylvania. We were avid gardeners. We did a lot of gardening, but we kind of really leveled up by moving on to 25 acres. And I brought the same ridiculous worldview I had about marriage to gardening. So I just started tearing up the land, planting stuff, just expecting that just because I wanted it to work, and I put some seeds in the ground and I put some fruit trees and I bought animals, just that I'd be successful. And man, was I wrong, right? Because I didn't realize that I didn't have any of the knowledge, wisdom, experience, health, wholeness, fitness. I mean, I was in okay shape, but I was definitely Mr. Dad bod back then. And I'm trying to manage 25 acres. And it was just overwhelming to me. And I had this big reset about my marriage and my homestead at the same time, which is, you know what, neither of those work if you're more attached to the outcome of them than being the guy that can do it. And so I started to turn inward in both homesteading and marriage. And I decided I need to make sure this works. And it's been a gradual, slow and steady path towards fixing and making both of those better. But the pain.
Outcome independence is the key. And I want to share something for anyone watching this, because I've been to your home a couple of times. And now abundance in the gardens and the raised beds and all is the norm. And in small areas, you have tons of growth, healthy plants that are producing a bountiful harvest. You know how to manage it. You have chickens. You have chickens you raise to eat, chickens that get eggs, and ducks. You've got the whole 25 acres isn't farmland. It is very strategic. There is an intentionality with it now, and it shows the results. I
There's also
can't
been
imagine how much canned stuff you have in
a
a
decent
given
amount.
season.
There's been a real pruning in that though, because kind of like marriage, I just thought, well, just put more into it.
Yeah.
And I did the same thing in my marriage. When my marriage would feel uncomfortable, I would just, go do more books, more retreats, more. And that's what was really confusing to me, because I was not a guy that was sitting around like Homer Simpson in his underwear, drinking beer, flipping the TV remote about my marriage. I was active and engaged in my marriage, and it was still suffering because I was just confusing action with intention and wisdom. And I did the same with my homestead. I joke around like, this is just how foolish I was. I had in my adult life never drank goat's milk. And I bought a goat barn, 13 or so goats, fencing, and cleared a pasture. I had this massive investment. I just went all in on goats, right? And
Yeah.
and I hadn't even tasted the milk, right? But this is just the extent of my lack of wisdom. Um, I was doing everything really big. I was just like
You're manly.
super overachiever. I thought about myself that way. Um, I was I was an idiot, to be honest. Like I had the right spirit, but going about everything the wrong way. And so now, interestingly, and there's a metaphor here for marriage, I had to scale back down to basics, right? I had to go from massive gardens to like just a few right out by the house and get better at that. I've recently had to, after many years, like take a break from goats, right? Because I didn't know what I was doing. And despite trying, I was overwhelmed and too attached to the outcome. And so I had to let those go, right? And so we've scaled down, and now by gaining competency, wholeness, wisdom, we're scaling that back up, but from a new place of fullness instead of as a path to try to feel good, by the outcome.
And with intentionality. You're growing it intentionally now in stages. It doesn't have to be, oh, we've got to do this, we've got to multiply exponentially. No, no. That's just what's the next step. And what a lot of men don't realize is it's about a mindset shift and an open heartedness to get out of their head and get into their heart.
Yeah.
We're energetic beings. And when we start being more heart focused, our partners can feel that. It changes things. And again, whether it saves it or not is immaterial. Once you get to where you're living a heart centered life, it's hard to go back to living in your head.
It is. And
life's too good.
There's a couple of things I want to respond to. First, most men that we find, not all of them, but I would say 85% of the men we work with, when we can show them how to live in their heart, if divorce is not already finalized for some reason, and sometimes men, when they meet us, that it's already well underway. Some of those end up reconciling, but most men, if we have a chance to meet them early enough where they experience a turnaround, it is highly successful, interestingly, in turning their marriage around. But to do that, there's got to be this shift that you talk about. And I would describe that shift for me as I had to stop saying, what do I have to do? And I had to start asking, who do I need to be? And it might seem woo-wooey to some people to say that, but you don't change or fix a marriage by doing. You change it by being. And that's important, because if you have a person trying to guide you who is encouraging you, do, I would suggest your chances are pretty small of that working, because that's not a wise perspective. And to me, no matter what your marital status as a coach, mentor, guide, etc., if you can show a man how to be, which is about being whole, showing up in strength with intention, showing up without blame and victimization, but showing up in your best being, that man's going to flourish no matter what the outcome is. And we see this all the time. And this is another cool thing about what we do, is not just the diversity that we have in the four founders that started Mentoring Men, but we have about 8 or 9 other mentors that are working with us, all from different backgrounds, different stories, different challenges. And then the men themselves, right? In our community, I don't think I've ever actually tried to add this up, but we probably have, would you say maybe a quarter is divorced? 30% maybe?
About a third. I think that.
Okay.
I've never done the math. And the funny thing is, nobody in our community judges marital status, because quite honestly, and I know you've run into this too, sometimes divorce is actually the best option based on the other individual involved. We can have unconditional high regard, and there's but at the end of the day, it takes 2 people to make a marriage work, and they have to want to.
Yeah.
And sometimes that other person is checked out, or they've done some things that eliminate them from being in a partnership.
Sure. Yeah. Now,
And
interestingly, let's add this because I think this is a hallmark, unique feature of the mentoring men community is in that 1/3 or so that is divorced. There's not a man that I know of who is a participant in our community who is the angry divorcee. And I think that's, to me, is really rewarding to be a part of, and that we don't have a bunch of villainous men who are sitting there, angrily wagging their finger at their ex-wife. These are men that have learned how to, I would say, virtuously divorce, or how to be virtuous in divorce.
Lovingly divorce, even.
Lovingly, yeah. That's been really interesting to watch because, like you said, sometimes that is the necessary outcome or the necessary ending, as Dr. Cloud would say. But if you're going to do that from a place not from pain and anger and resentment and contempt, but to do it from a place of freedom, I think is remarkable. And we have a community with lots of men on that path, and that's been really great to watch.
Charlie talks about, she didn't grow up playing Barbie going, okay, now it's time to get divorced. Nobody wanted this outcome. And I talk about, if you were angry and pissed off and screw you up, and I want a divorce, you're not ready for a divorce. Your heart's not in the right place. You haven't grown. And it should look like, I'm done. It is, because this isn't something that gets resolved in 2 or 3 months. This is a journey. And as you're working on yourself and healing yourself, sometimes that, half the times or so, it'll heal the marriage. And it is a loving, kind energy. And we don't have a single screw her, that bitch guy in our community that I'm aware of. And that is the unhealthy wanting to blame. And again, I can think of 1 or 2 ex-spouses that their behavior in other communities, that would be justified. And we see this in social media. Divorce her. There's no fixing this, is the knee-jerk reaction. And I think the biggest mistake, there's 2 mistakes men make, is when the relationship is disconnected and you're unhappy, not working on yourself because you're early enough. And I was guilty of this all those years ago. I had, I was happier, had it better than most, was how I would have phrased it. So you got to work on yourself before you get past the point of no return. And don't blame, don't judge, don't shame her. Work on yourself and invite her to join you in something different.
But create that something different first. Yeah.
You've got to create it first. Again, I talk about create an amazing life and invite her to join you. And this is why, if guys in our community get divorced, they move through that phase very well because of all the work they've done leading up to it. And doesn't mean they wanted it, but they don't beat themselves up anymore. They understand, I'm letting her go because this is what she wants. She doesn't want to be here anymore. And there is no anger. There's no resentment and contempt. And that's a pretty mature way of moving forward.
And that doesn't happen overnight, just sort of the guy watching. Our work with helping men kind of renew their insides, it takes them through that painful process, whether they're divorced or not. The work we do is to help a man, what I would say is to become emotionally healthy and emotionally resilient. And so, sure, he goes through periods of time where he's struggling with why did this happen? The stages of grief, the denial, anger, pleading and whatnot. But where he lands is in a whole and healthy place. And one thing I want to say, just as what are guys thinking watching this, and what did I think in the days I was struggling? One thing, Dennis, I think some men fear is that if I talk to a coach or mentor who's divorced, he's going to tell me to get a divorce. And likewise, if I talk to a man whose marriage worked, he's going to just be a stickler for that. He's going to tell me I've got to stay married. And I would just say to a man thinking that that's not what we do. We don't tell men ever what to do. We actually kind of hold a mirror up of sorts and help a man find kind of his inner compass. And I don't know about you. I know, well, I do know you've helped a number of men repair their marriages as a divorced man, and as a married man, I've helped a few men conclude or see, I should say, in their own integrity that they can't operate as men with integrity in the world and stay married. Now, I'm thinking especially of a man who is trying to repair a relationship with a woman who is actively giving spousal, sexual, intimate energy to another man and is not willing to stop. Like, to be a man and stay in that relationship, you end up becoming a partner, for example, to your own demise. And that is an integrity problem for some men, right? And so, like, I've helped a lot of men conclude, like, yeah, the most benevolent, kingly, open-hearted thing to do sometimes is to serve your partner divorce papers. And maybe that would be unexpected for somebody watching this, that because they might think, hey, this Sven Masterson guy, he's got an agenda to help you stay married. And this Dennis Collins guy, he's got an agenda to help you get divorced. And that's just not what we do.
And as coaches, we need to not be outcome dependent, not push an agenda. Like I said, all I'm there is for the man to help him on the journey. He needs to figure out what's next. And it's interesting too, because I can't say I'm happier with one result or the other. I'm happy. There's a point where in the journey, every man kind of hits the switch flips.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it has nothing to do with the outcome of the relationship. To me, that's the most satisfying. He kind of was like, I figured out I need to, where I need to be, how I need to be. And again, we don't have techniques. If you do this, it'll prevent her from moving forward. No.
Yeah, those are kind of ridiculous. I mean, they're great at selling digital books.
They're selling hope.
Courses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say selling wishing. I wouldn't say it's hope, but because at least hope you have some agency involved, but wishing is really just thinking that I can do things to manipulate her into doing what I want. And that's a deadly way to think in a relationship.
And are you still in a loving, kind relationship that you love? No.
Yeah. You kick the can down the road a couple months though.
Exactly. And look, yeah, nobody plans on getting divorced. Nobody wanted to get divorced. But that doesn't mean that isn't the right answer sometimes. And I've got some men I've worked with that are happily married and have the best marriage they've ever had. And I love that. And I've gotten to where I tell men, one, I don't care about your marriage. I care about you. I can help you. And whether you stay married or get divorced, that decision you will figure out down the road. That doesn't impact me.
Yeah.
You being whole, complete, a loving, open-hearted man, that's the win for everyone. And something we don't often say, the men who work on themselves like this, what we see is improved relationships with their children.
Yeah.
And
it's a really gratifying part, since so many men, that's their chief fear, interestingly, about a marriage dissolving. It's not the marriage dissolving, it's the kids, right?
I'm never going to see my kids. And I had one man describe it as he became open-hearted and started being less gruff and less the angry dad. Instantly more affection. And think about it, guys. Is there anything better than when the kids and the dog mob you as you come through the door? Daddy, daddy, daddy. That kind of energy. I mean, I don't think there's anything better in this world.
Yeah.
And that comment he told me I'll always remember, because I was like, and his kids were at that 3 or 4 through about 8-ish age. So a little bit of a spread, but it's universal. We see it with every man we work with. And, you know, is there hope for the man who's watching this thinking, yeah, but listen, you're worth working on, you're worth improving yourself for yourself. And you will eventually get clarity, either that you need to make a partner change or that you can invite her to join you in a version 2.0 relationship. The reality is sometimes she's been dying for you to take action, but nobody quite has the words without the other person being defensive, because nobody taught us how to be a great man and how to fill our own cup first, and you know, be a great husband, and about emotional intimacy and connection. They don't teach that in school.
Now, I know men are watching this. You're saying, well, yeah, but I'm not the one that wants to get a divorce, or I'm thinking about it. It's my wife. And what do I do? And, you know, if that's you and you're watching this and you're looking for somebody to help you, I want to give you a strong word of caution, because we talk to hundreds of men a year each, and we know what a desperately panicky man looks like. We call these men hair on fire. They feel like their hair's on fire. They feel like they must save the marriage. And it's easy to be the prey of lots of hucksters online when you're that man, because to be honest, you're very easy to take advantage of. You're very desperate, and very desperate people make very desperate decisions. And so what I would encourage you, if you're watching this video and that's you, your wife just said, hey, I want space, or I want a separation, I want a divorce, I love you, but I'm not in love with you, something like this. You're probably looking for answers. What do I need to do? And this is going to be, Dennis, probably the guy who's like, I got to find a guy who knows how to fix it. And that can be a little bit of a trap. I would say, well, actually, we do know how to fix it, but it's a paradoxical, counterintuitive path that you might be surprised at. And so one of my challenges, your challenges, you know, are even what we face in the community, is helping a man to see your problem is not impending doom in your relationship. Yeah. Your problem is that you've actually elevated the relationship above yourself, and that you don't know how to be okay without a relationship. And that could be the hardest thing about what we do, is helping a man to see that if you focus on your relationship, it will die. If you focus on your own wholeness, health, well-being, you will definitely not die, and your relationship will likely flourish. But it has to be that order. And man, it's so hard for people to get this through their heads, you know, when they're feeling anxious and fearful and afraid, and they're clinging to the relationship. But what words would you give that guy, the guy who is saying, yeah, but I can't focus on me, I have to make this work first, right? What would you tell that guy?
So 2 hours ago, I had this conversation. I said, look, you already think she wants to divorce you. So if focusing on yourself and working on yourself for yourself upsets her, how is that any worse? And he's like, well, I said, what if you stop talking about the relationship? And men, do not talk about being unhappy with your sex life. A conversation will never fix that issue either. And stop talking and just work on yourself, whether it's through our journey to masculine greatness. If you want to go through to self-paced working with a mentor, start making yourself whole and happy. And what we see is when you start creating this life, and you realize, oh yeah, I can exist even without her. A lot of times the wife will be over here going, he's got some good stuff going on. What's the deal with that?
We hear this
the
all
woman
the time.
Who used to leave the room when you walked in is now suddenly asking, what are you and the kids going to do? And you could tell she wants the invite, because you stopped talking about it. You stopped creating pressure on her. And instead, you've relaxed and you started focusing on you, like you did before you got married. Remember when she found you attractive and you two fell in love?
Yeah.
You weren't focused only on her. You were living life being you. That's how most of us were. And then we met her. And then we did a little less with our friends and a little less with our friends. And, we slowly kept losing ourselves just bit by bit until we're dad and provider and
And
not the
you're
man, the
abdicating your
warrior.
energy. One thing you
Yeah.
didn't mention in all that, but it's worth telling the men watching this. When you're looking towards your wife to figure out the future of the relationship in your life, you are living in powerlessness. It really fundamentally means that she owns where the future goes for you, and she doesn't want to own that. That's
No.
not a responsibility she asked for. And so when you're focused on the relationship, she is becoming really responsible for your overall sense of well-being, what happens to you. And it's actually usually that pattern that leads to this break in the relationship in the first place. It's a man abdicating his sense of agency as a man, his sense of personal power. Now, I don't mean power over her. I'm not talking about some sort of patriarchal power, but the power to lead yourself, the power to be your own sense and source of well-being and happiness and fullness. And when you look to a woman in your life to give that to you, you are simply not going to stay married happily.
Well, you kill the polarity, and she feels that she's having to take care of you like another child as opposed to
Yeah.
having a partner. And quite honestly, men, it's your job to lead in the relationship. I have a video coming out on this here in the next few days. Leadership, not dictatorship.
Yeah.
She wants you to lead. Is she capable of leading? Absolutely. But we're wired different, men and women. And the feminine will respond and bloom to masculine leadership. And if you're not providing it, she's now picking that up on top of her own issues and responsibilities. And it's become a burden. Just because she can do something doesn't mean she wants to do something. And I think that's the mistake. We've listened to too many of societal's talking points and beliefs, and we've abdicated our responsibilities when it comes to leading.
Well, yeah, men are very afraid of their power because because of the way these pendulums have swung. It's like we tend to only talk about and think about things by the very polar dysfunction at the ends of these pendulum swings.
Yeah.
And not understanding that a man having power he doesn't get it from her. He doesn't take it from her. He doesn't remove something from her. It's about learning how to be your own battery for your own life, that you stop mooching off everybody else, right? And same with leadership. These things, they're very difficult to talk about in videos like this because everybody watching brings their own limited, all of us, we have biases. And so we're filtering words like this through bias instead of understanding the deeper, larger conversations, that we're not telling men how to lord over women and how to, be controlling. We're not
partnering with them, not lording over them. And you used the phrase battery, and I was listening to someone talk about, are you a battery or a vacuum cleaner? And I use the are you Eeyore or Tigger? One brings energy to the environment, one drains it. And leadership brings energy to the environment that is synergistic when it's with your partner.
Yeah.
And
I'm married to a very strong, independent woman who's an excellent leader. And for me, being a leader in the relationship doesn't mean in any way I'm superior to her. It means that one of us goes first in some things, and it's not going first in privilege, to be honest. It's going first in mostly hard things. And it also doesn't mean I do everything. My wife is better at so many things than I am, and she's responsible for a lot of those things. I trust her to do that. And I don't see leadership as a pejorative thing, but or saying that I have that in the relationship.
Well, you're right. A healthy leader, and for the men who are struggling with this, think in the workplace. Think of that manager who was amazing, who would hire highly skilled people because he was secure in himself, as opposed to the insecure manager who doesn't hire super more skilled than him people because he doesn't want to appear less than. Who's the one you want to go back to work for? Because we've all had one of those managers.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And it's no different at home. but again, we assign all these extra meanings, and we make it more difficult than it needs to be. We lead where we have our strengths, and it is, again, it's not about one is better. It is, one is better at some things than the other, but together you make this amazing partnership. And life's a lot better when you have an amazing partner, isn't it?
That's a trick question in men's work.
Yeah, but you've
My life is
created an
amazing
amazing,
either way.
right?
It's nice having the icing on the cake that I have in a partner. I'm blessed with a terrific
Yeah,
partner. I didn't know
I
that
have
for
a
a long
great,
time, but I
well,
had
and
to let
I,
it be the cake.
yeah, and I've created an amazing life for myself. And then I met Melanie, and I invited her to join the adventure. And guess what? There is nothing that I want to do as part of how I was being in that amazing life I created that I've stopped because I'm in a relationship. None of it. And she doesn't feel less than or taken for granted. It's about figuring out, okay, how do we work this now? And I'll use one example. I have a monthly poker night, been going on for over 10 years, a bunch of buddies. And when she moved in, she said, "Do you want me to leave on poker night?" Which I thought was really insightful and thoughtful of her to ask that question. And I told her, "No, you live here. You're you're my it wasn't fiance then, but I've asked you to come live here. I don't ever want you to leave because I'm doing something." I said, "Now you're not going to come down to the poker room and hang out." I said, "That would be a boundary that but no." And you know, you have two people who are not looking to take exception, but to go, "Hey, what would you like?" She felt comfortable enough to ask the question. And we get to have these great conversations because we're not defensive and we're not making assumptions. We're just going to have a conversation and it'll go where it goes.
Yeah, from a foundation of health, I think.
Yes.
Wholeness. All right, let's wrap this up. So the guy out there who's clicked this video because he's in need of marriage guidance and help and is wondering what kind of help is out there, what should I look for, what should I steer clear of? Just to summarize, I would say don't look at marital status, first of all, because there could be a divorced man who might give you the best advice you've ever gotten. There could be a married man who might give you the worst advice you've ever got. Rather, look for the man who is encouraging you to be and not to do, and look for men that can show you how to be your best self, not with, act fast for $99.99, and we'll throw in these 2 extra ebooks, but look for the guys out there that are flourishing, I think, regardless of their marital status. And the internet is filled with them, but you're going to have to look past some of the glitz and glamour out there and the fancy marketing maybe to find that. I would encourage you, if you're watching this video and we've made you at all curious, to consider setting up a free session with either Dennis or myself. I'll put both links below in the video description. You could talk to both of us if you want. You could talk to one of us. You could hear more perspective from men with different outcomes. And I would encourage you to think about requesting access to our community, because you're going to find hundreds of men there from all kinds of walks of life, nations, outcomes. But one thing you're going to find they all share in common is a high level of virtue, character, integrity, and a commitment to being their best self, regardless of their marriage outcome. And no matter what your story is and where it's going, I promise you, we probably have someone there who has experienced it or is experiencing it and can offer you support. So Dennis, any last words for the men watching?
That brotherhood, this community of men, is the secret sauce. That's often what's missing in addition in a lot of men's lives. And we've seen it. We've seen men who've come in and have made connections and have bonded, and that person has helped them grow and evolve. It isn't just for founders, it is the community, the brotherhood that really is special. And what brings me so much joy to see that.
Yeah, some really neat things going on there, and lots of really interesting and deep connection taking place among the men there.
And it's not just online. I want to make this one last point. Yes, we have in excess of 20 group coaching opportunities to join the Brotherhood every month. We have retreats, we have regular meetups. Multiple times a month, there are men in the community getting together around the globe. And that is the cool thing. You're not alone. And depending on where you live, there might be a large group of men that you can get together with.
Yeah.
And that's a little extra bonus, I think.
Yeah, I love seeing all these posts that men are putting up where they, we had these guys, I won't name them, but who just, a number of them got together at an Airbnb for the weekend and spent the time being together. And I don't know if you saw, one man mentioned he was able to be more real, authentic, and vulnerable than he's ever been to anyone in his life. And to me, that's really good evidence that the character of the men and kind of what we're creating in the world is meaningful. It's giving men the ability to be seen, to be supported, to find a tremendous amount of renewal, and to go out in the world and do great things. And I'm very excited and proud of what we're doing. And I hope that men watching this will become curious and find out more. That all starts, by the way, with a call with one of us. We protect our community very carefully, and so you can find out more about it with a conversation. And if it's something you're interested in and we feel like you're a good fit, we would be happy to invite you in there. And with that, we'll wish you a good day. We thank you for watching this video. If it means something to you, and you can add a like and subscribe and ring the bell and comments and all that, that helps us to get higher quality content. I would say not necessarily editing quality, but authentic quality in front of more people on the internet. And it would mean a lot to us if you would do that.
Aren't we supposed to say smash that like button? Isn't that a requirement?
Smash that like button. Yeah, whatever. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.